over the last couple of years, we have been blessed by several JDM performance models over the years. You've got Honda Civic Type R and Toyota's GR models, but you could say that the car that opened the floodgates for JDM performance cars in the country would be this one, the Nissan GT-R. And we're also really happy that a lot of manufacturers are letting us play with them on the racetrack. So Nissan has brought us over to Clark International Speedway to take the new GT-R out for a spin. And as a bonus, we're also going to be driving the new Z. GT-R! Oh my God! But before we head on to the actual cars right outside, we're actually in the sim room where we will virtually drive the 370Z and the GT-R around a simulated version of the Clark International Speedway. Now, I just finished my lap, and what's counted here is the first lap, so there's no practice laps or whatever. As you can see, I'm already making excuses. And truth be told, I did quite badly. And a couple of laps in, of course, I got the hang of it, but since the first lap is only counted, the times aren't great. But at least I was able to have a feel around Clark International Speedway with these rather powerful sports cars. Of course, a Nissan event wouldn't be complete without a mention of its heritage. In this case, Nissan brought out a couple of examples of the early Zs as well as a couple of GT-Rs, well, Skyline GT-Rs to be exact. Now, we're going to start with the Z first, and this is a 240Z, or a Datsun 240Z, or a Nissan Fairlady Z S30. S30 being the chassis code. This one came out in 1969. It had a straight six engine, and a big deal at the time was a 5-speed manual transmission. Most cars had like 4 speeds, or some even had 3-speed manuals at the time. Now, by today's standards, the horsepower figures don't sound too impressive. It made about 150 horsepower. But if you're gonna go back to 1969 or 1970, you have to realize that your average Japanese family car made about 60 to 75. So 150 in this thing was an absolutely huge deal. Okay, so you're probably wondering what we're doing beside another S30 or S31 era Nissan Fairlady Z. Well, that's because, if you haven't noticed, it has a different front end. Now that is what they call the G-nose, and it was primarily for motorsports because that droop snoot front end was a little bit more aerodynamic than the standard Z models. And of course, the hood is longer, and you're also gonna see headlight extensions all the way right at the front. All right, now we move on to the Skyline GT-R range, and obviously what we have here is an R32 GT-R. But actually the GT-R name dates all the way back to the late 60s with a Hakosuka Skyline, or the box Skyline. And at the time, Nissan's intention was to enter a car for sort of its GT racing series over in its home market. And given its success, they ended up making a second generation in about 1972 or 1971. However, during that time, the oil crisis hit, and the second generation Skyline GT-R only made 197 units. It took a while before Nissan would bring back the GT-R name, and technically this is the third generation Skyline GT-R, the R32. And basically, Nissan just went all out with this. They gave it all-wheel drive, a turbo straight six, and basically every tech you could throw at it in 1989. Now, of interest is its all-wheel drive system, or what they call ATESA. And ATESA isn't just some random term that Nissan came up with. It's actually an acronym. And it stands for, wait for it, Advanced Total Traction Engineering for All Terrain. And now we come to the last car on display here, the R33 Skyline GT-R. Now the R33 does get some flack from Skyline enthusiasts and GT-R enthusiasts. Some people would call it a boat because it was so big compared to the R32. But one thing people forget is that the R33 was actually even more dominating in the motorsport scene, especially in its home market of Japan. And at the same time, it was one of the first cars to lap the Nürburgring in about 8 minutes. I know a lot of cars do 7 minutes these days, and about 7 minutes 30. But if you're gonna go back to 95, when this car was first introduced, 8 minutes was almost unheard of. That's how big of a deal the R33 GT-R is. And people these days just make memes about it being a boat of sorts, but really, if you dig deeper about the R33 and know about its legacy, you're gonna have a lot of respect for this car. Now, like the R32, it has a 2.6 liter straight six, the RB26, and on paper it says 280 horsepower, but actually that's just to comply with the Japanese regulations at the time. In reality, it was easily making more than 300. Same with the R32 actually. Now the reason for that was a gentleman's agreement that was set sort of in the 80s and in the 90s that, you know, cars are becoming more powerful and whatnot. And the 280 horsepower figure is just to appease the Japanese government. Of course, Japan finally got rid of that gentleman's agreement, which is why we have nearly 600 horsepower in today's GT-R. Now for a little bit more Z appreciation, Nissan Philippines actually set up this little theater. It's actually in the paddock, and it's essentially a compilation of clips from the past, from the 60s, 70s, and even the 80s. And we recently greeted to a rather nostalgic view of the 90s as well. And basically what's going on here is a little bit of an explanation of how the Z was formed and also the fans of the Z along the way. And obviously there's some popcorn inside, so I might as well pop back inside and continue watching. Alright guys, so it's time to go on the track, and the first car I will be driving is none other than the new Z. So the engine is smaller this time around, but it packs a bigger punch thanks to a pair of extra turbos. So from 3.7 liter V6 naturally aspirated, we are now using a 3 liter twin turbo V6. And let's see how it goes on track. So with me in the new Z today is none other than George Ramirez, who has driven this car around a couple of times already. For now, we're going to take it a little bit easy, give some impressions on this car, and with the way I'm driving it, you know what? It's not even flinching right now. This car is chilling on the racetrack. And what I can tell you is that it's got bags of grip. Of course, I dare not to turn off the traction control or the stability control, because I don't want to be the guy who wrecks it.
Plus, you don't need to.
Yeah.
It allows, I put it on sport mode, so it allows quite a lot of rotation for it.
Okay, so for comparison, I am also going to drive this, the 370Z. So this one doesn't have a turbo engine, and it has a 3.7 liter V6, naturally aspirated, but makes less power than the Z that I just drove earlier. Alright, so comparo time. And in the car with me is Stefan Ramirez. So hi Steph.
Hello.
Actually, me and Steph go
Quite a way back.
Yeah. Way back in college actually.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Steph trusts me with this car.
Of course I do. Of course I do.
This takes a bit while longer to respond, huh?
Yeah. Well, it's NA.
Yeah.
But throttle, feel, pedal, you mean? A little bit.
Yeah.
This is 2020, I believe.
Yeah, it's a 20 model.
Yeah. Turn in. Good. Onto the outside. Braking. Stay out. I'll leave you on manual.
Yeah.
There. Start your turn in. Good. Apex on the right. Squeeze.
I don't want to say it's slow, but you feel the difference between this and the 400.
Oh, for sure.
Medyo malayo, dude.
Yeah, for sure. But you put it on 2 more turbos.
That's true.
Diba? Onto what would almost essentially be this same engine, just with turbos.
Yeah. And now for the GT-R. Well, okay, the Z is the main event, but this is also a main event. And we're gonna take it out on the track. This is the 2024 model, but before we do that, we actually have to gas up. So, see you in a bit. Alright, so now with the GT-R, oh my god! Okay, I actually had to lift off there, man. I had to lift off there. Oh my god.
So I wasn't even able to introduce my instructor for the GT-R. It is Jaime Ramirez. And he is gonna take me on a guided lap here because I am going to need it because this is the most powerful car I've ever driven on a racetrack. And brake. Okay, so far my impression is it's easy to drive, but the speed is overwhelming. I'm gonna lift off early, man. I'm sorry if our viewers are gonna call us wusses or call me a wuss. You guys try driving this thing on full throttle.
And for our final car, it is the pre-update Nissan GT-R. And yes, this one does have gas this time around. So let's just compare notes compared to the 2024 model and see what's what. And in the car with me is none other than Luis Ramirez. Because the other GT-R scared the living crap out of me, I am going to rely on Luis' instruction to keep me not scared. It's still as hugely explosive as the 2024 model. Truth be told, thanks. From those impressions, I don't think Nissan really had to update it because this thing is still hugely, insanely fast, especially on the straight. And the grip on this thing is gonna ease into the throttle. Okay, I'm gonna lift off early, Louis, because I am a wuss. It has been a great day at the track here, and we are really thankful for Nissan for lending us these cars out to go do some laps. And it's not just the latest versions of the GT-R and the Z that we're able to drive today, it's also the previous versions of the Z and the GT-R. So just a quick recap of each car that we've driven today. So 370Z, still a solid car. I mean, yeah, it's pretty old already, but my God, the way this one drives, Nissan says it's not a totally new car, but they changed like 80% of it, and that 80% almost makes it feel like a totally different machine. That's mainly because of its twin turbo engines. And personally, I think the new Z would be my favorite in this batch. Now for the GT-Rs, I will admit that the 2019 model scared the shit out of me because the rear was just really wiggly. That's not the fault of the car, that's really more of my skill set, but hopping into the 2024 model, it's a whole different ball game. I mean, it feels similar in a way, but there's just a little bit more confidence when you're just slamming on the throttle when corner exit. But all in all, great cars no matter what. And when it comes to performance, there's no doubt that Nissan definitely knows what they're doing. And to those people who do end up buying the new Z or the GT-R, I just have one request. For the love of God, please bring them to the racetrack because you guys have no idea what you're missing when it comes to the abilities of these cars.